Mike Watt from San Pedro, California, telling you, listen to Icon Fetch.
Welcome to Icon Fetch, the web's premier music interview show. Now, here's your host, Tony Peters.
Hey, thanks for joining us for another podcast. And our guest this time, Craig Chaquico, is a founding member of Jefferson Starship. And he's the only member to play on all the albums from the inception of Jefferson Starship all the way through the end of what became Starship. After the band broke up, Chaquico forged a new path with albums like Acoustic Highway and Acoustic Planet, which was nominated for a Grammy for Best New Age Album. Craig's currently in a bizarre legal battle to recover one of his prized guitars. And so, we welcome to the show, Craig Chaquico. Craig, good to talk to you, man.
Hi, Tony. It's great to talk to you. How are you?
We're doing great. So, I guess a good place to start, I'm watching the Grammys the other night, and they're doing a tribute to David Bowie, and they're doing a tribute to Glenn Frey and the guy from Earth, Wind & Fire and Lemmy and all that. And, it's kind of a shame we seem to be losing these guys, a little bit too frequently here. But we lost, a cohort of yours in Jefferson Starship in Paul Kantner not too long ago. And as I understand it, Paul was kind of the guy that sort of saw you playing live in a club when you were just a kid, right?
Yeah, Paul and Grace were actually friends of a band member of mine, and they came to see him play. He was actually my English teacher. I was still 14, 15 years old, wearing a fake mustache, believe it or not, playing with a lot of guys that were older than me. And my English teacher had heard me play at high school, and oddly enough, it was on the senior lawn, and I was only a sophomore, and so he told me to come back after school, so I thought I was going to be in trouble for that, but instead he asked me to join his band. And so from there, I'm lying about my age, wearing a fake mustache, and it turns out that members of the Jefferson Airplane knew my English teacher, Jack Traylor, because he was a well-known folk guitarist and lyricist. I had no idea. He was just the coolest English teacher in high school.
Nice.
And obviously, being in his band was a lot of fun for me, just playing with older cats that were good players, but I didn't know that he knew people that knew of him before they were ever even famous. So Paul Kantner and Grace Slick, when they became famous, still had this great love for this guy's music and songwriting, and would still go see him play. And so when they saw him, they heard me, and then one thing led to another, and I ended up being the lead guitar player and songwriter with them for all the Jefferson Starship and Starship albums.
Nice. And as I mentioned at the open of the show, Jefferson Starship went through a lot of lineup changes. You have Marty Bowen in the band, then you got Mickey Thomas in the band, Grace is in and out of the band, all this stuff. You were the one constant through through all that tumultuous ride. You have any reason for it? Did you feel like an obligation to the band? Why were you the only guy that sort of made it all the way to the end kind of thing?
Well, no one's more surprised about that than I am, because I always felt like the new kid. I started playing with everybody on Paul and Grace's solo albums while I was still in high school, and the Jefferson Starship hadn't formed yet. It just seemed like this big family of Bay Area musicians that all knew each other. They were all at Woodstock together. They were all at Altamont. In fact, I was at Altamont, but I was in the audience. So about 6 months later, I'm actually in the studio kind of doing a little audition. And at 16, I started being invited to play these recording sessions, which was about the same time Neil Schon was playing with Santana. So we would cross each other in the hallways and not even know who we were, but we kept looking at each other like, who's that other kid? What's he doing in here? So that's how it began. And after once I graduated from high school, I'd already been on 3 albums with a lot of great people that had come in and out of that that Paul Kantner, Grace Slick, Jefferson Airplane community between David Crosby, Graham Nash, Santana, guys from Quicksilver. It was just this amazing group of like a family. So when it came time to tour, my band with my English teacher had an album that came out on the Jefferson Airplane label. So we opened for what was called Jefferson Starship, which in fact was basically Jefferson Airplane without Yorma and Jack, without the original guitar player and bass player. They had me play lead guitar and Pete Sears who had been on a lot of the albums with us as a guest player. He came over from England, and he had been playing with Rod Stewart and all these great people. And so they asked him to take the bass seat and me to take the lead guitar seat, and then we became, co-pilots along with everybody else at this whole Jefferson Starship thing that started in 1974 with the first album, Dragonfly. And yeah, you're right. I am the one that was on every album and all that, but it didn't seem that it started that way. I was just kind of glad to be there. And after that first tour, Grace asked me would I like to move to San Francisco and join this new band that they're forming called Jefferson Starship. And I thought, well, I could either go back to college or I could join this really cool band. And I told her the usual stuff. I told her to have her lawyers call my lawyers, and I'd get back to her.
Right.
No, not at all. I said, yeah,
right.
Let's go.
Sure, let's do it. Right.
Yeah, that's kind of how it happened.
Right.
And little did I know that once I joined the band, they started getting gold and platinum albums, and then when I left, that all stopped. And that's I love saying that only because it's just an odd statistic that really means nothing. It's just a coincidence. But
right.
When I joined the band, I was there for all the hits and albums, and then by the time I left, everybody I had enjoyed playing with had already left anyway. Really, it was just Mickey, one of the singers, Mickey Thomas, and me. And at that point, the direction of the band had changed yet again, and at that point, it really wasn't a band per se. So I thought, well, I might do something really scary and crazy, and go out on my own. So I did, and started playing acoustic guitars around the world, and had a Grammy nomination and this and that, #1 albums, doing a guitar, but playing more the instrumental. Not as many vocals kind of a thing. So,
right,
so
yeah.
Now, full circle, my shows now have my Starship stuff and my instrumental stuff, and we just found out that one of those electric guitars that I played all of those solos on in the first Jefferson Starship albums may be in existence. We thought it was destroyed in a riot, and it just popped up in a guy's collection.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Now, so one of the kind of, if you dig into the Jefferson Starship lore, one of the kind of notorious instances of the band was this riot that broke out in Germany in 1978. What was going on there? I mean, first of all, what caused the riot?
Well, the riot was caused because we didn't perform. And, Grace was back at the hotel. Half the band had already gone to the venue, which was this gorgeous natural amphitheater up in the mountains looking down on the Rhine River, and it was just a beautiful day. Leo Kottke had just gotten through playing. Well, it was beautiful. It had been raining, but when we started playing, when everybody started playing the concert, the sun came out. So it was really beautiful, and all our gear was on stage ready to play. I could hear the amps humming and buzzing, and I could see my guitars ready to go. And we get a phone call that Grace isn't coming to the show because she's sick, and so we had to make an announcement that we weren't going to play. And I think the audience, there were like 10,000 people there that. I don't know. They just got really upset and rioted. I think maybe they might have thought that it was a. Later, I heard that sometimes there would be American bands advertised at some of these shows, and then at the last minute there'd be a quote cancellation, and that they were actually sort of fraudulent events that had occurred in the past, and like Fleetwood Mac today. Oh, they couldn't make it, so now we have so and so, and I think maybe somebody might have thought that, but gee, I don't think
okay,
so.
Yeah.
There were posters made. We were there. It's just that. We didn't play. There was a riot.
Wow.
And,
okay.
Everything got burnt.
So they have this riot. You're running for your life, right? It's safety first, equipment second, and so you thought that this prized guitar that you had was destroyed. You thought it was, well, certainly it's destroyed. So now we fast forward years later. Where was the first inkling that you were aware that maybe this guitar actually survived the riot?
Yeah, just within the last year. And in fact, I left before there was a riot. We weren't going to play, and so we thought, well, maybe some of us can go back and talk to Grace, or maybe, on the other hand, maybe it's a good time to get out of here too. So we left, and then the riot happened after I was gone, and it was on all 3 network newses, pictures of the stage, burnt. I mean, this was back, this was before internet and
right.
Cable. There was only 3 networks, but it would look like what plane crashes look like now. It was
wow.
a big swath of burnt stuff on the ground with little pieces here and there. I mean, it's like basically like a quarter mile of just burnt junk, and that's where all our gear ended up. So when we left Germany and had to do our next show at Nebworth in front of 100,000 people. We didn't have any of our gear. We only had stuff that we could rent and borrow. And it wasn't until just within the last year I heard that my guitar might still be alive. Prior to that, Pete Sears got his bass back like maybe 2 years ago, and that started me wondering, well, how did his bass show up if everything was destroyed like we thought, like we were told? And so I started trying to find serial numbers of my guitars, 40 years later, and I couldn't really do that. But out of the blue, because of Star Wars, believe it or not, we were in a Star Wars Christmas special. You might not want to go into that too much. It's apparently one of the worst things George Lucas has ever seen, and if he could, he said he would destroy every copy with a hammer personally. But
right, it's so bad it's good, right? Isn't that?
Well, hey, if you ask me, yeah, and it was the first time that Boba Fett was ever introduced, so
nice.
It's iconic in that respect. But it's a 2-hour special that didn't quite have the production techniques as the first movie because it came out right in between the first and the second Star Wars movies. But we happened to be in there with the best TV production of the time, but it was more along the lines of like a Carol Burnett variety show, which was the best TV production at the time. And so it didn't really quite have that same Star Wars, the motion picture, the first time you ever saw it, impact. But in it, I'm playing a certain guitar that this fellow on the East Coast wanted to verify if it was that guitar that he had that I was playing in that video. So he said that he had gotten a serial number from a list of serial numbers that he found in a magazine. It was written in German in the 70s that had serial numbers. So because of Star Wars and because of this magazine that this guy had unearthed that had been written in Germany and had serial numbers, he was able to find a serial number of a guitar that he thought I might have played in the Star Wars show. And I said, well, at that time, the riot had already happened, so that can't be the guitar in the show. But if you do have that guitar, that means other guitars exist. And I said, our bass player just found his. And then this guy told me, not only did he have the serial numbers, but he knew someone who was posting that guitar on a blog with the serial number and everything. So boom, there was my guitar. It was like going to the airport 40 years ago to pick up your girlfriend, and the plane crashes and all that's left is ashes. And now 40 years later, you find out that your girlfriend never got on the plane.
That is unbelievable. Wow.
It is. And the girlfriend never got older either. She looks exactly the same. I've gotten older.
That's great.
But
right.
The guitar
but,
was great.
Oh, man.
Your love, be my lady. Be my lady.
So all right. So you reach out to this guy that has your guitar, this Les Paul from years ago, and I guess now you've got kind of a legal thing going on. Is that what's happening?
Well, now it has turned into a legal thing because originally he was very cool about it. In fact, the guy took great care of the guitar, but he said he considered it an investment, and if he could get the money he paid for it back. I mean, he admitted it was my guitar. He didn't know it was. I'm sure he did not know it was stolen when he bought it. But now that it's stolen property, he wanted to give it back, and I said, well, I'll help you. I mean, you can just go to the guy that sold it to you. It was a reputable, guitar dealer, or go to your insurance company. And so for a year, I've been helping him do that. But during the course of that time, now he's decided to keep it. So in order to get it back, I have to actually go to court to get it. And I don't know why he decided to keep it, but I don't know why. But to me, it's like, look, if we can get you the money for it, and you can just get another '59 Sunburst Les Paul, then it's a win-win, and I'll wait to get it back. But now it's been over a year, and I'm still waiting. I spent tons of money trying to help him, and now he's decided not to give the guitar back at all. So now the only thing we can do is, this court date had been set ages ago, and we have to just keep going through to it. But you know what's an interesting thing about this court date? It's June 13th, and that's the exact day that Red Octopus was released 41 years ago. So it's like the album that I played a lot of these songs, a lot of my Les Pauls on, was released 41 years to the day that this court date happens to be shown.
Yeah, I'm all about numbers, man. I believe in that kind of stuff. So you know what? Maybe that'll be maybe that's a good omen then. So.
If only you believe like I believe, baby, like I believe, we get by.
Well, you never know. I just think the synchronicity is really strange because those are the Les Pauls. I had two really nice Les Pauls that up till now were destroyed in the riot. Now that one survived, maybe the other one's still out there too, but between the Gold Top and the Sunburst, I played all the guitar solos on all of the Jefferson Starship hits on all those first 4 platinum albums from 74 till the riot in 1978 was the last time that lineup of the original Jefferson Starship ever played together in 1978. And now Paul's gone. So if we're going to play with him, we got to go outside and play under the Milky Way because he's another star in heaven. But,
right. Yeah. Well, let's talk about Red Octopus for a minute, just because, like you said, we're about 41 years ago. From the last year was the 40th anniversary of this, and that was really kind of a pivotal thing. I mean, you guys had released other albums before that, but Red Octopus was the one that really kind of put you guys on the map. Miracles became a huge record. I mean, that probably steered the band in a completely different direction from probably the initial idea of when Paul was putting everything together, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, the whole band was put together by Paul, and it was definitely an evolutionary process. Red Octopus was the second album that we did as Jefferson Starship, and it really did take off. I remember being on tour, and it went to number 1 4 different times, but we weren't ever like sitting down at rehearsals, or like Paul never sat down and said, I'm going to put together a band that's going to have all these number 1 songs and singles. I mean, it never was on our radar to do that. So even when the album was going number 1, Grace and I would hear people talking about, oh, we're number 1, and we thought they were talking about the Raiders or the 49ers, like somebody in the Bay Area had won a sports team. Well, hey, we're number 1. Oh, no, we're number 1? What do you mean? How could we be number 1 at anything? So our whole attitude was sort of like that, and then we got really fortunate that by putting that kind of heart and soul into the music and not thinking about the business part maybe, it just seemed to happen by mistake, accident, And so when these albums, and something like Red Octopus was such a huge success, it really surprised us. Because imagine if you were a record executive and someone came to you and said, hey, I'm going to create a super band, and it's going to have some people from Jefferson Airplane, Quicksilver Messenger Service, a guy that used to play drums in the Turtles and Crosby, Stills and Nash, and then we're going to have kind of a hippie guitar player from Sacramento, California, who's still a teenager, and we're going to bring this awesome English bass player who played with Jimi Hendrix and Rod Stewart over, and then just to throw something different in there, we're going to have all these lead singers like Grace Slick, Marty Ballin, everybody's a songwriter, everybody's a musician, and just to make it even more interesting, we're going to throw in a senior citizen black gentleman who plays the violin.
Right, Papa John Creech, right.
And that was the hit album. That was the 8 of us,
Right.
And it was so disparate of all these different people. No one would go, oh, put those guys together and they'll make some music anybody wants to listen to.
Right.
And we got lucky,
Right.
So you're right. Red Octopus was a big change there at that point.
Right.
Well, Marty came back in the band too. And I think that made a big difference.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Absolutely. Now, what's interesting, looking through the history of Jefferson Starship, you had a songwriting credit, at least one on every album, kind of thing, and what's interesting is, it was like, how on earth did you divvy up all the credits when you're putting something together like that? Because it seems like you almost kind of had to divvy it out. It's like, as I look at through the discography, it's like, okay, well, Paul wrote this one. You got one for Craig. You got one for Marty. I mean, how did the song, when you're putting a typical Jefferson Starship album together, was it kind of a democracy where, like, okay, everybody gets a song kind of thing? Or how did that go about?
Well, sometimes it turned out that way. I think it was a democratic anarchy. I mean, we always called it a democracy as long as we did what Paul wanted to do.
Ah, right.
That's a little bit of an exaggeration. He wasn't a tyrant, but he was definitely, we would all come together with our ideas, and somehow it would just work out. It wasn't like any one person had a say. And oftentimes it would just be a matter of, well, that song Craig wrote really seems to have that rock thing, and he doesn't have lyrics. He's got a chorus, but, Marty or Grace might want to write it, and then someone else would have a song with lyrics and an idea, and they'd say, yeah, but it needs an instrumental. It needs 3 minutes of guitar solo. So then they'd look at me and they go, can you handle that? No problem. So they would just be a really fun. I had the best job in the world, man. I was younger than everybody else. I was at least 15 years younger than most people in the band. So I had that best job. They just pointed at me and I played guitar or I wrote. And it was like, being that young, you kind of stay out of all of the love triangles and the love quadrilaterals and all those crazy things that happen, because those guys, a lot of them, they'd been together in Jefferson Airplane. So Pete and I only came on board with Jefferson Starship from the first album. So, it was kind of I missed out on a lot of the drama, which maybe made it easier for me to navigate that terrain. But it always felt real organic the way the songs were picked and stuff. It was just, like I said, democratic anarchy. It's what felt right. And same with the way we played our songs. A lot of times it was like, what are you going to play? I don't know. What are you going to play? I don't know. Let's just see what happens. And that's kind of what would end up on the album.
That would work out. Now, I noticed one of the songs that it looked like in the songwriting credits, a lot of times you wrote the music and left the lyrics for other people, but Find Your Way Back is one.
No, it's been a long, long road since I packed up and left on my own, and I carry a heavy load, just trying to get back to a heart.
If I'm not mistaken, you actually had a hand in the music and the lyrics to that one. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of times, like Fast Buck Freddy or rock music, Find Your Way Back, more so I wrote the lyrics, but most of the time it was always just the music, like you said, and maybe a chorus, and a verse here and there, but a lot of times just the music. And with Find Your Way Back, the lyrics were all mine, and it was sort of from the idea that, we all have choices we make in our lives, and sometimes you say, gee, I wish I could go back and do that one better, this time around. And in this case, it was kind of a love song. I wish I could go back in time and start all over somehow and get it right from the start, and find my way back to her heart. And it's kind of I've had people tell me they've actually tried that line on their girlfriends, and with varying degrees of success. I told them, well, it never worked for me, but
Right.
I tried to write a song with it.
Right.
But that was the idea. It was something universal we could all
Right.
relate to, and in
Yeah.
that sense, almost like these guitars, I hope they find their way back. 'Cause
Right.
those guitars are like girlfriends. In fact, I probably lost at least one girlfriend because I spent too much time with these guitars.
There you go. Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. When you find a guitar, I mean, I did read an interview with you. We're saying, like, you find a good guitar, it just, you probably know from the instant you stick it in your hands, you're like, oh, yeah, this is it. This, it just feels right. And it kind of speaks to you kind of thing. And it's like, when you've been without that and it's out there, that's gotta, it's like that child that you just can't get to see kind of thing. So.
Well, it's very much like a member of the family, and every time I hear one of those solos on the radio, like from Runaway or Miracles or any of the songs I play these guitars on, it's like looking at an old family album that survived the plane crash. You see it or you hear it, but you don't get to, talk to them, see them, hold them, speak to them, and that's how it is with the guitar. It's like for all these years, every time I heard any of the stuff I played, it was that I recognize that sound, I recognize that guitar, and
Right.
And now to feel like, wow, it's somebody actually kept it. I mean, the person who has it, I'm not saying they're a bad person by any means. In fact, they could have carved their girlfriend's initials in the guitar or something, or made a lamp out of it. But no, the guy really loves the guitar. That's why I wanted to make sure he got another one or had one, or we could make it right by him. So. And you're right; they're very unique, though. It's like the one, you had that one girlfriend that had a certain look. You might see another girl with the same look, but it's not that girlfriend.
It's not the girl. No, not at all. It's no imitation thing kind of thing. So,
it's like they can clone your pets, but they can't clone their personality.
Right, exactly.
Now you're going to quote me and say, Craig said that girlfriends are like pets. And that,
see, I'm getting you in trouble already. Now that's it. So, let's talk about your solo career for a minute. So Starship breaks up, and you actually are able to kind of continue on and find a whole new path with this, Acoustic Highway, Acoustic Planet. In fact, I mean, Acoustic Planet gets nominated for a Grammy, in a totally kind of different genre. Was this stuff kind of organically coming out of you? How do you go from kind of the loud guitars of Jefferson Starship to this kind of more understated, softer kind of stuff?
God, that's a great question, and it's not the first time people have probably wondered about that, because when I first started playing with Jefferson Starship, my mom and dad were musicians, and they had played what would be considered more traditional jazz with, acoustic pianos and organs, and my dad played saxophone and accordion, and they thought that someday I'd play jazz, or what they called real music, and they thought all those years of playing with Grace Slick and everybody around the world was just a little phase I was going through, and that someday I'd play real music like Dad or something. And now when it came time to do well, like we were talking earlier, the band had kind of broken up. All the people I enjoyed playing with had left, and it was just me and the singer. So I thought, well, I don't know him, guys. We're not really doing a lot of guitar songs lately, and it kind of sounds like you're thinking of going more in this Mickey pop direction. So I'm gonna just, I gotta go. So you're in this band forever. It's kind of like leaving your day job. It's scary, actually. I was home a lot. I was actually working on a lot of different types of music. Some of it was more hard rock, more like the songs like Jane and stuff that I wrote. But this was at a time where, it's funny, a musician's home for a while. Somebody's going to get pregnant. And sure enough, my wife got pregnant, and I noticed that the acoustic guitar was a lot more welcome around the house than the electric guitar. And little did I know, like you said, it was very much just an evolution. It wasn't planned. I started working on some music with Ozzy Allers, who played keyboards with Jerry Garcia on some of his live shows and live CDs. And Ozzy and I started writing instrumental music there wasn't any lyrics. And people were going, well, who's going to listen to that? And we were going, good question. And so we didn't know. We actually put these albums out to different jazz labels, blues labels, rock labels, and no one could find a place for it in their thinking, because they said, well, we hear rock, but we if you sounded more like this person or that, we'd sign you. Or the jazz label would say, we hear jazz, but if you sounded more jazzy, we'd sign you. And everybody was kind of telling you they wanted you to sound like somebody else, until the one label said, we like it just the way it is. They put it out. The first album, Acoustic Highway, becomes the #1 album of the year in Billboard for independent album, new age release. Nobody knew that. And the next album went to #1 in Billboard again. And like you were saying, I forget, it was nominated for a Grammy. I mean, all these things are great, but the main thing for me is that somebody finally heard the music and someone got it. And a lot of those places that said, well, if you sounded more like so-and-so, we'd sign you. I've heard them since then have said, hey, if you sounded more like Craig Chaquico, we'd sign you. But they didn't say that to me.
Right. Now, your last record, by my count, I think was 2012's Fire Red Moon. Is that right?
Yes. So
you got any new material in the works?
Well, right now we're just finishing up a live recording and a DVD that we did. We were talking about dates earlier. June 13th was the anniversary of Red Octopus, which is going to be 41 years when I go to court over one of these guitars. But June 13th last year was the 40th anniversary of Red Octopus, and I did a show at a cool little club in Mill Valley, California called the Sweetwater. That was all our like watering hole. All the musicians and artists and bands in the 70s seemed to live in Mill Valley or around it. I mean, if you couldn't go to the Sweetwater in the day and not see Bob Weir or the Grateful Dead or the Doobie Brothers or Santana or Neil Schon or Huey Lewis or Maria Mulder or Grace Slick or Bonnie Raitt or my God, Night Ranger. It was just every band, you can imagine, kind of lived in this little town, and that was the one little club that had the music, and it only sat 100 people.
Wow.
So we went back, we went back there and played a concert of mine on the 40th anniversary of Red Octopus. So I was able to do some of the Red Octopus songs, plus some of my solo stuff that was written right in that town. I mean, I lived there for my solo stuff and a lot of the Jefferson Starship stuff. So it's kind of a neat rendezvous of spirit and music to get filmed and recorded on that magical night. And my bass player mixes the Santana albums now. He works with Narda Michael Walden at the studio that does all the Santana records. They also did Whitney Houston and so many great singers and stuff. In fact, Narda produced "Nothing's Gonna Stop Us Now," which was a big song.
That's right.
I was on that. And
nice.
That was in the movie Mannequin, the greatest movie since Gone with the Wind. No, but it's in my my movie collection. But
right.
But anyway, my bass player just mixed Carlos's new record that'll be out soon, and now he's finishing mixing my live DVD that will have music from all the Jefferson Starship days, plus my solo stuff, and I get a chance to go in and do some covers of some Hendrix and Clapton. So
nice.
Yeah, for me, it's nice. I'm a guitar player, so it's got to be nice for me. Everybody else, I hope they like it. But
right. Now, your website has some great archival stuff and all that. Why don't you give me the website then?
Oh yeah, if you go on my website, it's just CraigChaquico.com.
All right. Well, Craig Chaquico, it's good talking to you. Good luck on the upcoming live DVD, and also in hopefully recovering those guitars as well.
Hey, thanks, Tony, and thank you for spreading the word and having such a great show for the rest of us that enjoy this kind of music. And I really appreciate you and all the listeners of Icon Fetch, and I look forward to the next time our paths will cross again.
Indeed. It's Craig Chaquico there, and hopefully he gets his guitar returned to him, returned to the rightful owner there. And looking forward to new material from him as well. You missed any part of this interview, you can listen to it again. We have a website, iconfetch.com. We also have our shows available for free download at the iTunes Store. Until next time, I'm Tony Peters. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Icon Fetch with Tony Peters. Want more great interviews? Head over to iconfetch.com. There, you'll find every interview we've ever done, plus CD reviews, This Day in Music, and a random album of the day. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter. Who is Tony going to interview next? It could be you. Send what you've got to Tony Peters. Icon Fetch, P.O. Box 292134, Dayton, Ohio, 45429. Or email Tony at host@iconfetch.com. Until next time, this is Joe Kelly. Have a great day.